Okay, got some sound there. Yep, we're good. So I'll get us rolling. All right. Okie dokie. We're going to take a look at a couple of cases today. We had started just a bit, and Foster and Gorman. Now I think we talked about county and pretty much covered it in terms of what it's all about, the data envelopment analysis. The Foster and the Gorman files are over in chapter 6, and I want to go through the keys with Foster because we did some manipulation with them in each of those, and those are there. And let me make them oops, I need to make them published, so I'll do that right now. My apologies. And to alert you to some I wanted to alert everybody to some resources that we've got over here. These cases deal with networks and scheduling, logistics, and so I have some resources for you to take a look at in terms of networks and network structures, network analysis. That would probably be, well, it would be a whole course on its own. And then logistics, what they call composite modeling. And then here's a very good group of people, the Humanitarian Logistics Association. What these are folks who work in the field, researchers and practitioners, and dealing with the issue of getting to people who need aid and who need help, etc. And so they're a great organization. They do some very, very good things. And that's usually, they get involved in a lot of things, including things like the humanitarian crisis that's going on in Syria, although they have to be cautious. They're not a military force. They're just people who volunteer. But they know that there's a lot of suffering they can alleviate if they can get stuff to people. And that's one of the issues, especially if you get into some of the parts of the world where there's just not the infrastructure that one would normally expect to find. So I wanted to clue you in on that one. And also, again, I've got a resource over there for you about networks, network analysis, network structures, and then a little bit of logistics composite. Now, I'm just going to say again, another commercial for that field. If you're a management or marketing major, particularly, logistics and transportation is a field that you really would be smart to consider. There's a lot, as I said the other day, there's a lot of opportunity there because as the global economy grows, as people become more and more oriented towards mobile purchasing and having stuff shipped to their home, or you get more and more big box retailers, say like a Walmart, who wants to get delivery going, or you come and pick up your groceries, that business, Amazon, the same thing. That field is just going to grow because you got to have somebody who does the order fulfillment and gets the stuff to the customer. It's not a sale if they don't get their stuff. And there's so many ancillary kinds of entities that are associated with them. And we're going to see here in one of these cases a network structure. Now, as I said the other day, it's just the textbook is going to give you some simplistic examples, and they're simplistic simply because they don't reflect the real complexity that you'll normally encounter out in the world. But we'll talk about that, and we'll see it. And also, don't forget you've got Foster and then Gorman. And let's see, county, it's due as well. So we talked about it. Let's take a look for a moment. Now you should see it. Everybody should see the Foster key, and that should be published there now. So I'm gonna open it up, okay, and I'm gonna download it, and we're gonna take a look at this case. And what we did is, as usual, I have you manipulate some variables to see what happens when we do some modeling. And I'll enable some editing there. The textbook, I want to get that for us there for a moment. This is the Foster generators problem, and just again to get our cells refreshed, let's go minds refreshed. Excuse me. Here they had built. We began to build we identify the objective function, and that's to minimize those costs. And we're shown the supplies in each of these nodes and the demands for those nodes. And to see it, they provide us this graphic over in 6.1. I think it's either behind here. Here it is. And as I said the other day, and I can't emphasize this enough because I don't believe that you get enough. I'm not sure if you get enough information or background in transportation, logistics, and you really need to. Even if you never work in that field, you're dependent upon those people. And boy, if you're a retailer, are you ever? And here's the thing. If you consider just a very simple income statement, and let's say that you run $100 million a year in sales revenues, okay, that would be your gross. And your cost of goods sold runs $30 million a year. So you got a gross profit of $70 million, okay? If you can get your cost of goods sold down 10%, you save $3 million, and suddenly you suddenly have a higher gross profit, and it will carry itself on down through the balance sheet. And if you can do that, you've done that without having to capture an additional sale, okay? Which means it's a far less risky proposition to undertake to try to do that to improve your profit structure than it is to try to go out and take the risks to get new customers and the work and the money that's entailed in that. But I want to walk you through the structure of this so you can see it. Again, it's a very simplistic, but it has all of the essential elements. First of all, you've got these circular things that they call, these are nodes, and you have origin nodes and destination nodes. Now, you could also have a node between those, and that node could either be a destination one, or it could be kind of a node that collects things and then distributes them, like a hub and spoke structure in airlines. But here we've got these plants, and we have how much they have in terms of supplies. And so we have these origin nodes. And then those lines that are across, those are called arcs, okay? And you see the distribution arcs, and then you see the transportation cost per unit. Okay? So what you're looking at here is, for example, with Cleveland, okay, for them to send units to Boston, it's $3 per unit. Got it? And if you were doing, you could do notation with these, and one's going to be Cleveland to Boston. And Boston, you see on the other side, has demand. You can see the demand for each of those distribution centers. Now, this is just the first step, essentially, as they present the problem in terms of the plants, the distribution centers, and you may have sub-distribution centers, maybe a couple of those down the line, or you may just have straight shipment to a customer, it could be a B2B situation or a B2C situation, straight to a retailer, straight to the customer. Again, though, we're trying to balance all that out, and it becomes an exercise for all intents and purposes of trying to load balance, getting the minimal amount of cost of shipping. And so we want to minimize that cost of shipping. Now, the authors do a nice job of laying out the basic fundamentals of this. I can tell you that if you go to work for a company that's in this business, there's a lot of proprietary software out there, extremely intuitive, but highly expensive. But that will take, as you input the data for your model, that will take that and will provide you a series of scenarios in terms of how you want to build your network. And you can do that from node to destination, and as you build that, then you start to get the whole picture in terms of how you're going to handle things and ship them. Okay. It's never ceases to amaze me that I've had so many students over the years who would walk through an establishment like a Walmart, like a Kohl's, or go and eat, or go to a Taco Bell, and never think about how did that stuff get here. Okay. And I can say this, I've had many times I've had people over the years ask me, what is the one characteristic that you've seen of business people who are highly successful and or entrepreneurs who are highly successful? And I can tell you there are two things. One, they have a work ethic out the roof. Number two, they're curious about everything. They're curious, and they'll say, how did you do that? Or how do they take care of that? Or how did you get that here? And that's what drives them to be innovative. And even within things that are pretty well known in terms of what we've got, the transportation systems are pretty much fixed commodities. It's how we use them that matters more than anything. So we're looking at moving these goods from one point to the other. So as you look at this model, it's pretty simplistic, but it does give you the basic. It does give you the basic overview or structure of any kind of transportation system. Now, they walk us through a matrix over here, basically this table, okay, in terms of the costs. And so they begin to build the objective function, the changing variables, and then the constraints. Okay. Now, luckily for us, we don't have to do this with a slide rule and a pencil like they did it 60 or 70 years ago. We're lucky to live in a day and time when there's software out there where you can go through training and people will train you how to use the software. You input the data and it will provide you maps, the whole kit and caboodle in terms of how you want to model your transportation system. And again, a lot of these techniques, if you haven't, you will hear about it at some point, is what we call the Northwest Corner method. These are ways that we move goods and services and people, but primarily goods, to remote parts of the world. How do we get, in this is a product of the Second World War, when we had to get stuff from all over the world. Just a quick kind of personal story. My late uncle, my dad's older sister, he was a merchant marine, is what they was called. And he was one of the people who, at the start of the First World War, were supplying Russia, the Soviets, who were our allies, against the Nazis, and they would take goods over the Bering Strait and deliver goods until the Arctic Ocean got frozen over. And so they did that, and they were hauling supplies and materials, and of course, underneath the sea lurked the submarines. And I think he made about 25 or 30 treks, was what he said. But that was an example of the kinds of logistical feats you had to accomplish. Then there's a famed Army Air Force Corps that supplied the Chinese during the Second World War when they fought with the Japanese. They'd fly over the Himalayas. All these kinds of things, these big amphibious invasions that occurred, this all had to be planned out, or you'd end up with a bunch of people piling in on top of each other to get slaughtered. So out of that bad thing, the good Lord gave us some good things, and one is we know how to move goods and services at great distances to get them there on time. So here we have the equation, and we're going to do a minimization function. Then we've got the changing variables and the constraints. Okay. And they give us some potential problem variations at the very bottom. Okay. And then they give, this is from that little lingo program that they've got up there, where they give you the objective value, outcome, and the variables, and then the reduced costs. So we're looking for any of these variables where we reduce costs. And here's the optimal solution. Then they walk you through some of those questions. Total supply is not equal to total demand. You'll want to take a look at some of those little caveats that the authors throw in there, because that's where the fun begins. And that's why you have to have a human being eventually working with this, who knows. For example, I-40 over here is all torn up. If you've driven between there and Oklahoma City, you'll see it. And it's really not conducive to a high level of freight traffic, i.e., 18-wheelers, because it's a death trap when it's wet and it's icy. It's probably a death trap anyway. If you drive through there and you see people going through, the thing that's interesting is it's an optical illusion. You have as much space in there as you do if you're driving out on the highway where they're not doing the work. But because you have those blinders set there, those concrete walls, it tends to give people tunnel vision, and they tend to underestimate the amount of space they have. Anyway, that's something you'd want to avoid. Well, they show us the network diagram for the optimal solution. Okay. And again, they give us a few more caveats. Let's go and take a look at this. And what I'd said is, okay, well, let's go ahead and compute the minimum cost. So it's a cost minimization problem with the following supply values. Okay. So we gave the Cleveland, we increased it by 8.6%. Bedford, we increased it by 9.4%. And then York, we increased it by 4.9%. And you can see our cost minimization. So we'll go ahead and if you don't have the solver on there, you'll want to go ahead and do it. And I'll take a look at this. And those are our changing cells. We've been through this before. And then the constraints. And then we're working still from the assumption that this is a simplex LP, that there's a linear relationship here. And there we go. Now, you'll notice that I did a sensitivity report, excuse me, okay? And that'll let us see which of these variables is going to cause us trouble or give us some opportunity to work with. And we see the shadow prices for each and allowable increases and decreases. Now, what's here may not be, in terms of an organization, may not be politically feasible. You might put a model together like this, but sometimes companies will operate in a suboptimal way because of tradition, or because maybe they don't want to alienate a key customer or customers. It might be a bias in terms of the ownership of the company. So they may not optimize. They may choose to sub-optimize. And that's okay. If somebody chooses to sub-optimize, that's fine, as long as they understand they've made that choice and that the choice comes at a price, i.e. we could do better. Well, you can see the sensitivity, and then here's the new supply values. And this was the original solution. And then we put in those new supply values. Okay. And so as we had more stuff to move, watch what happened. We were able, through the optimization, to minimize the cost, although we had higher supply values. That's simply by rearranging basically rearranging the arcs and what we carried. Okay. It would be good for you as you look through that portion of the chapter that I've highlighted, again, to take a look at the caveats that the authors give us. Unacceptable routes, for example. It was interesting. Over the weekend, the news was reporting about the terrible tornadoes down there that hit in Alabama, and people from all over from that part of the world. I think even there was somebody here in Oklahoma City or Norman that took off for there. But these are people, all they were doing was they were moving the trees and the branches out of the roads and getting them piled into piles so you could get the aid people in there, and you could handle down power lines, and you could start to do a search and rescue for the people. So I don't know, I haven't looked to see if they have announced any kind of toll in terms of loss of life, but I thought as I watched it, yeah, these people are really, really good, and they really know what they're doing, because the first thing they do is they clear every single road. One of the things is you watched it when in Puerto Rico, when they had the hurricane, the disaster that ensued is they didn't have the resources to get all those roads clear. And the worst part was they didn't have the resources to get their harbors cleared. So they sat there with stuff in a log jam they couldn't get much help in. And I guess maybe now they're moving forward. It's a story I've kind of followed it on to see, how it all unfolds. But when it first happened, they had a high rough, unacceptable root trap. That's pretty much Foster. And again, notice that we've been able, even with the changes in the supply, we've been able to minimize this and get it down to a little bit lower than it was by using the optimization model. Everybody see? Anybody have a question about it I could answer for you? Okay. Well, it's pretty marvelous stuff that we live with, and we're lucky to be able to live in a day and time when we have it. Well, I'm going to close this off, and let's take a look for a little bit. And I want to take some time to look at Gorman. And so we'll go back over to the module. And the Gorman is over on pages 279 to 283. So I'm going to open the Gorman key. Now I'm going to go back over here to page 279 and find it. Okay. This is the shortest route problem or path. You may have encountered a thing called PERT CPM, which is an acronym for Program Evaluation Review Technique Critical Path Method. That technique uses networking, but it assigns values to nodes, or assigns values to arcs, and then looks to see what is the critical path. If I'm sending supplies, which path takes the longest to get stuff there? Or you could do it with what is the most valuable stuff that I'm hauling, but that becomes a critical path. But what you're always looking there is for any way you can find a shortcut, or if you have a long path from one point to the end of that network, do I have slack time? Do I have slack resources that I can employ? Now, people that work in construction still use a thing called a Gantt chart, G-A-N-T-T. And the Gantt chart basically it's a matrix where it has a task completion start and end, and then it will have the tasks in a row. And so you'll see these intersections, if you will, task A, when I start it, when I end it, and they use those charts and take the model and compare it with what they're actually doing to see, is there slack time? if you've ever worked in construction or you've built a home or anything like that, you know that you can put it down on paper and it never works out like it does. I decided one time I was smart enough to be my own general contractor, and I was humbled as I had the wrong stuff coming in at the wrong time, and I had people standing there going, well, if we do this now, we're going to have to tear it out because you have this other task. And so that was a very humbling experience. At that point, from then on, I said, if I build another house, I'm going to hire a general contractor and let them do it, because that's what they do and they do best. Because it's a pretty complex process. So here, when we're trying to work through a shortest route problem, these are typical of things that may be time sensitive. You say, well, what would be a time sensitive kind of issue that you might want to deal with? Well, let's say, for example, that you're a Red Lobster, okay, and you sell fish. You sell you sell all kinds of fish. Well, you have a time-sensitive, shortest route problem. You want stuff delivered to you. And if you think there are lobsters running around out in Lake Texoma that they can throw in the Red Lobster Norman, go have a cup of coffee and think your way through it, because they have to have that stuff shipped in. So there are folks who specialize in refrigerated shipping to get things there quickly because it has a time-sensitive value. Produce is the same way. There are any one of a number of products where the shortest route is the route that they want. Well, the most obvious would be emergency medical services, okay? You want people there in so many minutes. And I think it's Prague that's about to maybe lose its hospital. And they're having a battle with some conglomerate that owns the hospital, or something, or the people want to shut that hospital down. I believe it's Prague. But here's the thing: the people who live there know that if that hospital closes its doors, it's about another 3 minutes of time added on to getting to urgent care, and 3 minutes in urgent care is all the difference in the world. That's why if you go up to Oklahoma City and you look at Baptist, they've got I don't know how many helicopter pads they've got, and they fly people in there, grab them and snatch them and take them over there as fast as they can, because they know that if you can't get people treated quickly, they will probably die or have a much harder recovery. Let's go over and take a look at the model here for a second. Here it is. And they're giving us these road distances, okay? Now, one of the things that the authors, again, are giving you a very simplistic model. They're giving you nodes and arcs, okay, origins and destinations. And the model's not too complex. If you follow along, you're going to notice that, for example, if you've got something running from node 1 to 2, it's 25, versus 1 to 3, it's 20. It's a distance of 3 between 2 and 3. From 2 to 4, it's 5. But from 2 to 6, it's 14. And then if you look at 4's distances, it's 4 to node 6, the completion. It's 4 over there to node 5. Node 5 is 7. You can see then you start to intuit quickly, okay, we're going to try to find the shortest route between these so that we know what is the fastest way. Now, I'm certain that the emergency services people all have I'm certain that they have software programs and applications that will get them to you as fast as they can get to you. There's no point in them not doing that. Of course, the problem becomes if there's something in that arc, that's the lines between the two nodes, if there's a detour or something of that nature. So that's why many of these, the larger cities will employ, there are a number of companies out there that will do this on they'll basically work real time as a vendor with them to make sure that they stay on track of, okay, well, there's construction over here, or we have a public event that day. And, I live not too far from I-35, and I can tell you when there's an OU football game and about what time it is, because on game day, you just see these massive lines of cars. Basketball, not so much, although you'll see a little bit of heavier traffic, but on game days in Norman, it's like they're just people just piling in there. If it's an early morning, like an 11 o'clock game start, people start blowing through there at 6 in the morning, so I guess they can have their brunch or whatever they do for an 11 o'clock start football game for their tailgating. So we're given this model to work with, and again, one of the things that will often precede folks putting data into a machine or an application like Solver or whatever application they may be using, they will try to sit down and work it out in graphic form, create a picture. So we're creating a model. Remember at the start of the course, we talked about making a model, okay? And so here's a model, it's graphic, right? We might even have a model in terms of a real-time, not real-time, but a fully dimensional model. We may send somebody, well, we could use Google Street for all intents and purposes and take a look at a route, okay? And just go, here's my start point, here's my destination. And if you use your phone or you have that GPS in your car, you're using an optimizing tool that will tell you the easiest or fastest way to get there. Sometimes it won't make sense, but again, that's because a machine may not have intuitively the real feel of the land. But here where they've developed a model, okay, and then we have a transshipment network, okay, and then we move on and we start to build the model based on flows. These are flows out and flows in, okay? Do I have any finance majors in here at all? I wonder if I do. One of the things that large multinational corporations do is they engage in tax arbitrage. And how they do it is they know currencies. They have people who know currency exchange rates cold, and they have clients that will move their cash or whatever, or they will plan to move whatever items they have to create a tax arbitrage. Meaning, if they're going to be taxed on profits, they'll move their money to one currency, or they'll just simply move the money to other accounts. They do this all the time. It's tax arbitrage. I had a friend I used to teach with. That was what he did as a consultant. He worked with some large firms over in Europe as they would move their money around so that they could have the minimum amount of tax. One of the things that he worked with on is a thing called a value-added tax, where as it's produced, it gets more valuable, they will tax that additional value. It was kind of interesting because he was using networking and flow in and flow out techniques to try to make sure they could get a tax arbitrage, i.e. they could reduce their taxes. So this shows you each node, and you can see the notation there. X23 is X2 to X3, X24, X26. We'll pop in over here, and here's the optimal solution. Okay. And go back over to the Gorman key, and I'm going to download it, and we'll take a look at it for just a moment, see what it looks like in real time. Now, again, the caveat that I've given you several times: if you put garbage in, you'll get garbage out. That's why if folks who work in this field understand that the model is probably constantly changing. That is, there are detours, there's road work, there's events, there are all kinds of variables that can occur on a route from point A to point B, or point B, A, B, D, G, and they have to be on top of those. They have to understand that because it may hold up. They also have to think about, you know, what times of day, traffic patterns, a whole set of things. So this, again, gives you a very simplistic view of what goes on. But if you go out there and you learn, and what will happen is if you decide to go out to work for somebody and they hire you to work in that field, they're probably going to send you to an extensive amount of training to learn the software that your vendor's supplying you. And then they're probably going to also immerse you greatly in the supply route itself, physically seeing it and doing it and understanding what it looks like. If you don't, you're kind of you're flying blind. And so we've got the Gorman construction. We've got some decision variables. Now, this is also introducing something to us that's a little different before, and this is what we call a go or no go proposition. A 0 means we're not going. 1 means we are. Now, you've heard me say many, many, many times, decision making is not a binary process. It is in the sense I can choose to do one thing or the other, but the outcome of my decision is not binary. It's shades of gray, and you'll hear me say that over and over again. And that's something, once you understand it, then the next question for you is well, why would I get the variation I have? And the reason you get the variation you have is because random events that can occur, or changing conditions, or your information's not perfect. Now, I think later in the course we'll take a look at the expected value of perfect information. If I had perfect information, what would it cost me, or what would it get me? But we never assume that we have that. So we're making a decision in terms of a go or a no-go, and we've got distances of the start nodes and the end nodes. These are the arcs. And you'll notice, look at here, now we got a conditional statement. And let's take a look at that for just a moment. Okay? And what this is saying is if D6, for example, equals 1, then it's yes. Otherwise, we leave it blank. So is it the shortest route? Okay. You'll notice there we have, I don't know how many routes we've got there. See, it's 4, I guess we've got 12 or 13, and there are 4 of them. So we have 4 solutions, if you will, 4 shortest routes, or routes, we may pronounce that. And you can see we've got each node, what goes out, what goes in, the net shipments, and the supply. Now, let me size this down a little bit, and we'll look at what we were doing here. And I said, compute the total distance given an 11.1% increase in ARC1 distances and a 2.8% decrease in ARC5 distances. Okay? So notice that we've got these ARC1s, then the ARC2s, 3, 4, and 5. And we reduced those distances, increased the ARC1 distances and decreased the ARC5. So if you would want to see it in terms of what it looks like back there, you can go back to the chapter, back to the book, and take a look there and see which ones I'm talking about. Okay? There's some of the figures. A little bit of an increase. And then they give us the sensitivity data, the sensitivity report, where we have allowable decreases and increases. And you can see if you look there at that first table, the variable sales, we have, in terms of increases, we only have a couple of them that are anything other than negligible. And then decreases. And you can see we see some heavy duty allowable decreases here. And in terms of what we get for reduced costs. Then we get the first sensitivity report. And we get the shadow prices and the constraints. And you can see with the constraints, we don't have a lot of wiggle room. We've run an optimal solution. Again, what we did here is we took arc 1 and we increased its distance. And we took arc 2 and we increased its distance. So how might that happen? Well, how it might happen is arc 1 might have to branch off to some new facilities or new customers, because this network you assume is going to grow one way or the other. You won't have a fixed set of nodes that you're working with. Again, it's not the most exciting stuff unless you say to yourself, you know, could I have an advantage with my customer? Could I have a market advantage if I can get stuff to people faster than my competitors? Then it gets exciting. Especially if your salespeople or if someone comes in and whoever you're dealing with in your industry can walk in and you can say, yeah, we can get it to you cheaper and faster. Or if they say, okay, I just want it faster. Maybe they have a pricing structure that avails them. They just want to get stuff faster out the door. So they turn their goods over. Maybe they have a high inventory turnover rate and they want to increase it. They're good at that. So that's why I'm gonna encourage you to go take a look at a book. It's over and it'd be worth having. If you're not, I think I've assigned it to at least one of my courses. It's called Competing on Analytics. This is an excellent example of that. And I remember it's been a few weeks ago, my wife and I drove by the big superstore there, the Walmart off of 19th and 35, and their pickup and delivery, not a lot going on. And so I'm just curious, let's go down to Norman and see what that looks like, because Norman's a different town, different kind of mindset with people. I drove over there and they have this line of people waiting for pickup. These are people those folks, their customers have bought into the notion of they order the stuff online, Amazon, the people from Walmart bring it out and check it over, they substitute it, and they redo the bill if they need to do that on the spot, boom, and I'm gone. They don't want to go through the aisles. And I said, let's stop and go in, because this is a Saturday evening, which is a prime time for when people are grocery shopping. And the place was like a tomb. I was shocked. But outside, you saw lines. There were 4 bays, and they had probably 10 cars in each bay, which told me something about it. It's working for them here somehow, or maybe the consumers are less resistant. I've tried it a few times, and what I found was I got annoyed when they would replace products for me. And it was a surprise. And I thought to myself, surely at some point you're going to find a way for me to come on here, order my stuff, and if you don't have it, tell me immediately so I can substitute for myself or just simply not order the product. Instead of this business of, well, okay, yeah, well, here's this, because I'm sure with if it hasn't changed significantly from my experience was, I'd have 2 or 3 items that I'd have to substitute. And if you want something, you want it, and if there's not a substitute, you get rid of it. And it annoyed me because then I had to change my bill and I had to go find the stuff somewhere else and all of this business. So there are lots and lots of business opportunities in this field, and the kinds of opportunities that are not going to run away from you. The jobs will be chasing you. I can guarantee you if you stick and you're good at what you do. All right. Well, I think that will pretty much do what I wanted to cover today, and then on Wednesday, I'll probably jump ahead into the next module and take a look at some of the cases there. I really encourage you not only to look at these case files and to pay some attention to them, but I also really want to encourage you to take a look at these resources I've got here for you about some opportunities out there. In those, I think in the prior module, I had some data for you, job data, and to see some of the look at these resources and think about, here's potentially an opportunity for you to get into a field. I can tell you this, that I've had a couple of students now who've decided that they wanted to go in that field, and one of them went into it just about the time I came here. He's pulling six figures now easy, and he's got people chasing him, headhunters after him all the time. And he went in, worked hard, learned, adapted, learned their applications. His initial employer was eating breaks out here, and he had an internship, and he had a tremendous practicum with them as well. And within 2 years, he was making more than any of us on the business faculty. And I'm sure now he's in the high 100s. The thing that's interesting is that this is a guy he's not about making money. He's about helping people enjoy and be satisfied with what they get. And that's a part there. And I think also in some of these humanitarian organizations, there might be some opportunities for you. I think that'd be a tremendous opportunity to get to go out and do those kinds of things and help people out. Well, folks, thank you so much. I'm going to call it a day. Anybody have a question? I'm happy to try to answer for you. Questions, anybody? Okay, we're good. I will see you online on Wednesday.